Hello! Today we're going to talk about how a bill becomes a law, the congressional process. First of all, there are 5 kinds of bills. You might not have known that, but now you do. There's public bills, private bills, companion bills, temporary bills, and my personal favorite, omnibus bills. Public bills are bills that affect the general public, things like the ACA. Private bills that address individuals, small groups, or a specific segment of the population or a business. The companion bills are bills that are similar or identical to bills that are concurrently in the House or the Senate. And then the companion bills might be sent to a conference committee to iron out the differences. A temporary bill is a bill that is introduced for the passage of new legislation that has an expiration date. Pretty much every other bill other than a temporary bill is considered permanent legislation. And then omnibus is a bill that packs a lot of different bills into one big old bill. They're obviously the hardest to pass. So, just for some practice, you have a bill granting citizenship to someone otherwise ineligible for a visa or decorating a military personnel. That is a private bill because it affects a small segment of the population or private citizens. You have a bill that has an expiration date, like the assault weapons ban that was in effect between 1994 and 2004, and then Congress didn't ever re-implement it, which is why people can buy assault weapons. That is a temporary bill. A bill similar, identical to one introduced in the House that is in the Senate, that would be a companion bill. A bill dealing with gun control would be considered a public bill. And then a bill that deals with unrelated topics, that shoves a whole bunch of stuff into that one, is things like spending bills. They tend to be really big, and it's a big deal. Like sometimes the government shuts down because they can't agree on spending bills. That's an omnibus. Alright, so where do they come from? Bills can come from a variety of sources: individual citizens, special interest groups, PACs, corporations, NGOs, but they can only be introduced to Congress by a member of Congress. So if you have a good idea for a law, just write up Mark Meadows, or whoever. A bill can start in either house, though most bills start in the House of Representatives, and they're required to start in the House of Representatives if they deal with money, if they have anything to do with financing or more taxes. And then the last step, of course, of how a bill becomes a law is what the president does. It's easy to say he only has 2 roles in the bill to a law process, veto or pass, but actually he has 4 things. Obviously, he can sign it. Obviously, he can veto it. However, that veto can be overridden by a 2/3 majority of vote in both houses. Thirdly, he can allow it to become a law by not signing it within 10 days if Congress is in session and he just lets it sit there. It automatically becomes a law. He may also pocket veto it. He can do this if Congress is adjourning within 10 days of the measure reaching the president. If he doesn't sign it while Congress is not in session, it dies after 10 days. That's in Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution. Alright, so here is your flipped assignment. There is a Bill to a Law flowchart attached to this assignment. So you're just going to number these scenarios. Which one comes first, all the way through step 8. So you're just reorganizing them. Alright, so congressmen function in 2 roles. They can function as a trustee or a delegate. And this is important when we're talking about how a bill becomes a law. If a congressman is acting as a trustee, then that means that they are voting based on their own personal judgment and conscience. So they're making laws, they're proposing bills, not necessarily based on what their constituents want, but based on what they view as right. Some congressmen act as delegates in certain issues, though. They want to behave as agents of those who have elected them. They want to vote the way that the folks back home think. They're willing to suppress their own views. They're willing to ignore party preferences in order to ensure that the people who elected them get ultimately what they would have wanted. And I think that there's this misconception in the American public that when we elect a congressman, we assume that they're always acting as a delegate, which I think is a little bit naive. Obviously, they're not. I think it's probably more common for congressmen to act as trustees. You can also vote partisan or politico. Partisan is when you vote according to your party, not necessarily paying a lot of attention to the people that elected you or to what the bill is, just voting along party lines. Vote in line with the platform, vote how the party leader tells you. There were a lot of issues with partisan voting for Republicans in the early Obama years because the Tea Party wanted to really force the Republicans into a more conservative box than I think they were willing to go to. That's one of the reasons why Speaker of the House John Boehner had to step down, was because he couldn't get any partisan votes in for any bills because the Tea Partiers kept blocking everything that the normal Republicans wanted to pass. Then there's the politico voting. That's a combination of the other three. Sometimes you vote partisan, but sometimes you vote as a delegate, and other times you vote as a trustee. I think that probably politicians will argue that they, for the most part, are politico. They do some of all three of those. Alright, so what I want you all to think about, but it's not a flipped assignment, is which of these congressional voting measures makes the most sense and which would you be more likely to choose to do? Trustee, delegate, partisan, or politico? We'll discuss later in the week. Have a good night.